I watched security footage of someone murdering my newborn baby. When the camera zoomed in on the killer's face, my entire body went cold. Because it wasn't some random stranger. It was my husband's new wife. The woman he married 6 months after he blamed me for our son's death and divorced me. The woman who smiled in their wedding photos while I was living above a laundromat, drowning in grief. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all started, to the moment I thought my life was finally perfect. My name is Clara Rowan, and 3 years ago, I was married to Nathan Rowan. To everyone who saw us, we looked like the ideal couple. Nathan worked as a financial consultant, sharp suits, practiced smile, the kind of man who shook hands like he was sealing million-dollar deals even at neighborhood barbecues. We lived on Alderwood Lane, where people waved at each other while secretly calculating who had the nicer car in the driveway. Have you ever wanted something so badly that it consumed every thought, every prayer, every moment of silence? That's what motherhood was for me. 5 years of trying. 5 years of pregnancy tests that broke my heart. 5 years of Nathan's family making comments at dinner parties about when we'd finally give them grandchildren, like my body was some kind of factory that just needed the right button pushed. Then, after all those years, I saw 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a baby to me. It was proof that my body, this body I'd blamed and hated for failing me, could actually create life. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Nathan seemed excited at first. He bought nursery furniture before I even finished my first trimester. Posted ultrasound photos on Facebook with captions like, "My legacy begins." Told everyone at his office, "My wife finally did it." I should have paid attention to those words. My wife finally did it. Like I'd passed some test. Like I'd been failing until that moment. But I was too happy to notice the cracks. I decorated the nursery in soft blues and whites. I sang to my belly every night. I read parenting books until the pages were worn. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose beyond just existing. The pregnancy was rough. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Swelling so bad I couldn't wear my wedding ring. Back pain that made me cry. But I didn't care. Every kick, every hiccup, every flutter reminded me that soon I'd hold my baby. Soon I'd be a mother. Nathan grew distant as my belly grew. He worked late more often. Spent weekends golfing with clients. When I asked him to come to doctor's appointments, he'd sigh like I was asking him to donate a kidney. "Clara, I'm building our future. Someone has to pay for this kid. Our kid. Not our baby. Not our miracle. Just this kid." Like an expense. Like a burden. But I told myself he was just stressed. That once the baby arrived, everything would change. He'd hold our son and fall in love and remember why we got married in the first place. I was so wrong. When labor started, it felt like my body was tearing itself apart. Contractions that stole my breath. Pain so intense I couldn't remember my own name. I screamed for Nathan, but the room kept spinning. Nurses shouted for blood transfusions. Someone said my blood pressure was dropping. I heard the word hemorrhaging before everything went black. When I woke up, a nurse was standing beside my bed with the gentlest smile I'd ever seen. "You have a beautiful baby boy, Mrs. Rowan." I cried harder than I'd ever cried in my life. They brought him to me, this tiny, perfect human with a wrinkled nose and fingers so small they wrapped around just one of mine. I named him Eli. It means ascended. Because he'd lifted me out of darkness and into light. For 2 days, I lived in a bubble of pure joy. I memorized everything about him. The way his nose scrunched when he yawned. The soft sounds he made while sleeping. The weight of him in my arms, like he'd always belonged there. Nathan visited, but not for long. He'd take photos, lots of photos for Instagram, then leave, saying he had clients to meet. I told myself he was just adjusting. That fatherhood took time. Then on the 3rd morning, I woke to alarms screaming through the hospital room. Nurses burst through the door, their faces tight with panic. My baby's monitor was beeping wildly, flashing red numbers I didn't understand. Someone shouted, "We're losing him." I couldn't move,
Couldn't breathe.
couldn't do anything but watch them swarm around my son's bassinet like he was already slipping away. A doctor touched my shoulder, and I knew before she even spoke. I knew from the weight of her hand, from the way she couldn't meet my eyes. "Mrs. Rowan, I'm so sorry. Your son didn't make it." But here's what I didn't know on that morning, the morning my world ended. I didn't know that someone had deliberately killed my baby. I didn't know that the security footage showing the killer's face was sitting in a hospital server, waiting to be discovered. And I definitely didn't know that the person who murdered my son was about to become my husband's new wife. Do you think a mother's intuition can sense evil, even when it's disguised as grief? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The doctor said it was genetic, a rare condition that caused sudden organ failure in newborns. She spoke in calm, practiced tones, her voice smooth like she'd said those same words 100 times before. Words like recessive mutations and incompatible alleles floated around me like smoke. Unfortunate, unpreventable, I sat there, staring at the wall behind her head, because looking at her felt impossible. My body was a shell, my mind detached. The world had tilted off its axis, and I was still sitting in a hospital gown, clutching air where my baby should have been. Eli was gone. Nathan arrived an hour later. Not running, not out of breath, not even disheveled. Just composed. He looked like he'd come straight from a board meeting, tie perfectly aligned, jacket crisp, shoes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I thought he'd rush to me, take me in his arms, ask to hold our son one last time. Instead, he stopped a few feet from the bed, his face expressionless, his eyes scanning the room like he was assessing damage. "What happened?" he asked. Not "Are you okay?" Not "Where is he?" Not "God, Clara, I'm so sorry." Just "What happened?" I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, raw from crying. "They said genetic. Something in our DNA." He stood there for a moment, silent. His gaze fixed on me, cold and analytical. Then his jaw tightened. "Your side of the family has health problems. Mine doesn't." I blinked, not understanding. "What?" "My bloodline is clean, Clara. No heart disease, no cancer, no genetic disorders. But your grandmother had lupus, didn't she? And your uncle, he died young, didn't he? The doctors said it was genetic, right? So it came from you." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Surely no one could be that cruel, that detached, that monstrous. "Nathan," I whispered, "we just lost our son. Our son died because of defective genes." His voice didn't waver. Not a hint of emotion. "Your defective genes killed our baby." I felt the words strike like a physical blow, sharp enough to knock the air from my lungs. My chest ached so badly, I thought my heart had stopped. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of what I was drowning in. But I couldn't move. I just sat there, numb, watching him turn and walk out. He didn't even glance at Eli's empty bassinet on his way out the door. The funeral was quiet. A gray Tuesday with cold wind and colder faces. My parents came from Ohio, their eyes swollen and red. My mother held me through every sob, every trembling breath, then left 2 days later because they couldn't afford more time off work. Nathan's family didn't bother showing up. His mother sent a bouquet and a message through her assistant, too devastated to attend. Nathan stood beside me at the burial site in his tailored suit, scrolling on his phone while the pastor spoke. When they lowered the tiny white coffin into the earth, I reached for his hand out of instinct.
He didn't take it.
Eli was buried that morning. By Friday, the divorce papers were already waiting at my door. His lawyer, a thin, sharp woman with perfect posture and colder eyes, delivered them in person. "Mr. Rowan believes this marriage has become untenable due to irreconcilable differences stemming from the recent tragedy." Recent tragedy. That's how they referred to my baby's death. As if it were a fender bender or a business loss. The divorce was brutal. Nathan moved faster than I thought possible. He'd already drained our joint bank accounts 3 days after Eli's funeral. Sold our house to his cousin for half its value. When I realized what was happening and tried to fight back, his lawyer painted me as unhinged, Asterisk, a grieving woman emotionally unstable and incapable of managing finances. Asterisk. They dragged my name through the mud while I could barely remember how to breathe. Every email, every court appearance was another knife. I'd sit in that sterile courtroom while Nathan sat across from me, perfectly calm, never once looking in my direction. By the time the papers were signed, I was left with my old Honda Civic, $1,700, and the mountain of medical bills from Eli's hospital stay, bills somehow listed under my name alone. Nathan kept the house, the furniture, the savings, everything. He even sold the nursery furniture I'd bought with my own savings. The crib, the rocking chair, the mobile I'd hung over Eli's bed, all of it listed online, gone to strangers while I was still trying to survive the sound of silence in our empty home. I moved into a small apartment above a laundromat. The air smelled like detergent and old metal. I worked night shifts to pay the bills, ate instant noodles, and cried into my pillow until my body went numb. Then one evening, 6 months later, I opened Facebook. I don't even know why. Habit? Maybe. Or maybe I was punishing myself. What I found shattered whatever was left of me. Nathan and Vanessa. Mr. and Mrs. Rowan. Married at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Her white dress shimmered like something from a magazine cover. The cake glittered with gold flakes. His hand rested on her waist like it had never touched anything broken. Vanessa Klein. Daughter of Gerald Klein, CEO of Klein Pharmaceuticals, a company famous for profiting off human misery. She was the kind of woman magazines called effortless beauty, which really meant she had enough money to never sweat in public. In the photos, she gazed up at Nathan like he'd hung the stars just for her. Their smiles looked effortless, perfect. Mine had disappeared long ago. I stared at the photos until my vision blurred. My heart wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. How do you grieve a child, a marriage, and a truth you never even saw coming? All at once. That night, I deleted my Facebook account, deleted Instagram, deleted everything. Because watching them live their perfect life while I was suffocating felt like dying all over again. Have you ever watched someone move on so fast it made you question if they ever loved you at all? Tell me in the comments. Because that was the moment I realized Nathan never did. The truth hit harder than the divorce, harder than the funeral. He had never loved me. I'd been a placeholder, a quiet chapter before his real story began. And when our baby died, when the one thing that tethered us forever was gone, he saw it not as loss, but as an opportunity. He didn't lose his family. He upgraded. 2 years is a long time to live like a ghost. That's what I became after the divorce, a ghost haunting my own life, going through motions without actually being present. I moved into a tiny apartment above a laundromat on the edge of town. The kind of place where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor's TV through the bedroom wall, and the smell of detergent seeped into everything I owned. My clothes smelled like fabric softener, even when they were dirty. The washer and dryer hummed at all hours like a mechanical heartbeat that never stopped. I took a job as a night shift clerk at a medical supply warehouse. It was perfect because I didn't have to talk to people. Just scan boxes, update inventory, and exist in fluorescent lighting from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. My coworkers were mostly other ghosts like me, people hiding from daylight and normal life. I stopped wearing makeup. Stopped doing my hair, beyond pulling it into a ponytail. Stopped looking in mirrors because I couldn't stand seeing the hollow woman staring back. I lost weight without trying. Gained it back from eating gas station food at 3 in the morning. Lost it again when grief made my stomach too tight to hold anything down. The worst part wasn't the loneliness. It was the phantom sensations. I'd wake up in the middle of the night convinced I heard Eli crying. I'd bolt upright in bed, heart racing, arms reaching for him before my brain caught up and remembered he was gone. Sometimes I'd hold my pillow and rock back and forth like I was soothing a baby that didn't exist. I avoided parks. Avoided grocery stores during family hours. Avoided anywhere I might see mothers pushing strollers or fathers carrying babies on their shoulders. Each sighting felt like someone pressing on a bruise that never healed. My parents called every Sunday. Clara, honey, you need to start living again. But how do you explain that living feels impossible when part of you is buried in a cemetery plot that you can't afford to visit because even the gas money feels too expensive? I stopped celebrating birthdays. Stopped celebrating anything. Time moved around me like water around a stone, always flowing, never touching. Then one afternoon in October, 2 years and 4 months after I buried my son, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer because the only calls I got were spam or bills. But something made me pick up. Is this Mrs. Rowan?
This is she.
I still use Nathan's last name because changing it back required paperwork and money I didn't have. This is Dr. Patel from St. Augustine Medical Center. We need to discuss something important regarding your son's medical file. The room tilted. I sat down on my second-hand couch, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white.
Why now?
It's been 2 years. There was an internal audit. His voice was careful, measured, like he was trying not to spook me. We believe there may have been a mistake in your son's case. I'd like to meet with you in person if possible. My mouth went dry. What kind of mistake? I'd prefer to discuss this face-to-face, Mrs. Rowan. When can you come in? If a hospital called you 2 years after your child died and said there was a mistake, what would be your first thought? Drop it below. I met him the next morning even though I hadn't slept. I wore the nicest clothes I owned, a black sweater with a small hole under the arm and jeans that were slightly too big. Dr. Patel was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop moving. We sat in a small conference room that smelled like coffee and fear. He placed a manila folder on the table between us, but didn't open it right away. Mrs. Rowan, I want to start by saying how deeply sorry I am for your loss. Standard opening. I'd heard it 1,000 times. Recently, our hospital underwent a comprehensive internal audit of all infant deaths over the past 5 years. We cross-referenced genetic test results with lab protocols and security footage. Security footage? He nodded slowly. During this audit, we discovered a data error involving genetic test results from the time period when your son was hospitalized. My heart started pounding. What does that mean? It means he finally opened the folder. Your son did not die from a genetic disorder. The words didn't make sense at first. They just floated there, thin, poisonous, like smoke curling through my skull. I heard them, but they didn't land. They couldn't. What do you mean, he didn't die from a genetic disorder? My voice didn't sound like mine. It was distant, shaky, echoing from somewhere far away. The doctor said. Dr. Patel exhaled, the kind of weary sigh that only comes from someone who's seen too much. He adjusted his glasses, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled a document from the folder in front of him. The pages were dense with charts, codes, and terms I couldn't begin to understand. The initial diagnosis was based on test results that we now believe were compromised, he said carefully, each word deliberate, as though trying to step around an invisible minefield. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Compromise. He hesitated, the silence stretching until it became unbearable. When we cross-referenced staff schedules, security logs, and lab reports, we found evidence of deliberate contamination in your son's foreline. The room went silent.
Cold.
Like someone had opened a window in the middle of winter and let all the warmth escape. I blinked at him, waiting for the punchline, the correction, the part where he said I misunderstood. Contamination? The words scraped out of my throat, dry and broken. Dr. Patel's eyes softened, but his voice dropped to a whisper. Someone injected a toxic compound into the fore. The dosage was precise. We believe it was intentional. Intentional. That word cracked something inside me. My chest tightened so violently, I thought I might pass out. My fingers went numb. The air felt too thick to breathe. You're telling me... I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. You're telling me someone murdered my baby? He didn't flinch, didn't correct me, didn't offer hope or confusion. Just nodded, his silence saying more than anything he could have spoken. I wanted to scream, to throw the table, to tear the world apart until I found whoever had done this. But I just sat there, gripping the edge of the chair so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to hold myself together before I shattered completely. Dr. Patel cleared his throat softly. "We've already reported this to the police, Mrs. Rowan. But there's something else." He turned his laptop toward me, the glow of the screen casting sharp shadows across his face. "We reviewed the security footage from that night. You need to see this." My stomach twisted as he clicked play. The footage was grainy, black and white, timestamped 3:14 a.m. The camera angle faced the hallway outside Eli's room. I recognized the outline of the door, the little plaque with his name on it. Then a shadow moved. A figure appeared, someone in hospital scrubs, moving with eerie calm. They paused at the door, glancing down the hallway, then slipped inside. My body went rigid. I leaned closer to the screen, every muscle in my body screaming at me to stop watching, but I couldn't look away. The figure moved to the bassinet, checked the monitors. Everything about their body language was practiced, careful. Then slowly, they reached into their pocket and pulled out a syringe. The glint of the needle caught the light for just a second before they leaned over and inserted it into the foreline. My breath hitched. I wanted to shout, to run into the screen, to rip them away. It only took 30 seconds. 30 seconds to erase my entire world. Then, as calmly as they came, the figure withdrew the syringe, looked over their shoulder once more, and slipped out into the hallway, vanishing like a ghost. Can you zoom in?" My voice cracked. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip my knees to steady them. On their face. Dr. Patel hesitated again. Then he clicked a button. The image pixelated, blurred, then sharpened, slowly, painfully. The figure looked up, just enough for the dim hallway light to brush across their face. And then I saw it. The delicate jawline. The smooth skin. The glint of diamond earrings that no hospital staff would wear on a night shift. My throat closed. I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't think.
Couldn't move. It was Vanessa Klein, Nathan's wife. The woman who had replaced me in less than 6 months. The woman who smiled in magazine spreads beside him, her hand on his chest like she owned the world. The woman who had held my son in the maternity ward, pretending to comfort me. My baby hadn't died from a rare genetic condition. He'd been murdered. And the person who took him from me wasn't a stranger. She was family. The world blurred. My heart hammered so loudly it drowned out everything else. I could taste metal, panic, disbelief. Rage bubbled up like acid, sharp and unstoppable. I wanted to deny it, to scream that the footage was fake, that it couldn't be true, but deep down, something in me had always known. There had been a wrongness about it all. The way Nathan had looked at me in that hospital room. The way Vanessa had hovered, too perfect, too present. Now it all made sense. Would you be able to stay calm if you discovered who killed your child? Tell me below. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't do anything except stare at that frozen frame showing Vanessa's face, as clear as a photograph. I started, but my throat closed up. "That's my ex-husband's wife." Dr. Patel's expression shifted from professional concern to something darker. "You know this person?" "Vanessa Klein. She married my ex-husband 6 months after our baby died. After he divorced me." The words tumbled out now, frantic and sharp. "But she's not a nurse. She shouldn't have been in that ward at all. Why was she there?" He pulled up another document. "According to our records, Ms. Klein, Mrs. Rowan now, I suppose, her family's pharmaceutical company is one of our largest donors. She had a visitor's badge that gave her extended access to certain areas of the hospital." Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. The timing. Nathan's immediate accusation. The divorce papers filed less than a week after Eli's funeral. The quick remarriage to a pharmaceutical heiress. It hadn't been grief or genetic blame or any of the things I'd torture myself over for 2 years. It had been planned, orchestrated. My baby had been murdered so Nathan could marry into wealth without the complication of a child tying him to his first wife. Why? The word came out broken. Why would she kill a baby? What could she possibly gain? Dr. Patel hesitated, then pulled out another file. We're still investigating, but we believe your son's case intersected with a lawsuit against Klein Pharmaceuticals. There was an experimental drug trial happening at this hospital around the time of his death. The compound used to harm your son matches a chemical signature linked to that trial. You're saying she killed my baby to cover up a drug trial? We're saying someone wanted certain medical records to disappear. Your son's file contained information that could have exposed problems with the trial. We think the initial plan was to alter records, but when that proved difficult, He trailed off, unable to say it. They decided killing a 2-day-old baby was easier than paperwork. Rage hit me like a wave, hot and consuming and so intense I thought I might be sick. But underneath the rage was something colder.
Clearer.
A part of my brain that had been asleep for 2 years suddenly woke up and started calculating. Nathan knew. He had to have known. The divorce, the drained bank accounts, the way he'd blamed me so quickly, it had all been designed to destroy my credibility before this truth could surface. If I'd ever tried to challenge the diagnosis, I'd have looked like a grief-crazed ex-wife making accusations. No one would have believed me. But now I had proof. What happens now? I asked Dr. Patel. The police have been notified. They'll likely want to interview you. And Mrs. Rowan, the current Mrs. Rowan, will be brought in for questioning once they build their case. I looked at Vanessa's face frozen on that screen, her hand on my baby's foreline, and something inside me that had been broken for 2 years started to shift. Not heal, it would never heal, but shift into something sharp and purposeful. They'd tried to bury the truth along with my son. They'd tried to bury me in grief and poverty and blame. But all they'd actually done was give me a reason to stand back up. If you were in my position, would you wait for the police to handle it, or would you start digging yourself? Let me know what you'd do. Because I wasn't going to just wait for justice to maybe happen. I was going to make sure it happened. And Nathan and Vanessa were about to learn that you can destroy a woman's life, but you can't kill her to fight back.
Then let's burn it all down, I said. Raina's laugh on the other end of the line was sharp and a little breathless. Good. Metaphorically first, literally only if you're very careful. We met 2 nights later in a booth at a diner that smelled like fried oil and coffee. I carried a manila folder like it was a sleeping baby, gentle, guarded. Inside were photocopies of bank transfers, time-stamped CCTV stills, hospital sign-in sheets. The coded emails Raina had pulled from an anonymous whistleblower, and the torn corner of a hospital scrub with something dark on it, preserved in a little evidence bag I'd begged a former orderly to take for me. Each piece felt holy and horrible all at once. Okay, Raina said, spreading the documents on the table between our hands. We don't go to the police first. We take this to someone who can move, someone outside the town so nobody can call the Kleins beforehand, a federal prosecutor. And we leak to 2 outlets simultaneously, one national, one local, so the story can't be buried. Then we file for an injunction to freeze their accounts. I read the words and felt them land like blows. Practical, ruthless, precise. Exactly what grief needed if grief was going to be useful. We planned like conspirators. We set passwords, burner phones, dropped emails that vanished after a single read. I stopped using my own car. I started taking different buses and walking different routes. I deleted social media caches. Every small thing felt like armor. When you know your enemy has lawyers with more money than sense, paranoia is survival. At night, I'd sit in my apartment and stare at the wall of evidence like it was a map of a minefield. I taped notes and read. Who saw her at 2:14 a.m.? Confirm payment from Klein Legal. Find camera angle that covers service door. I slept in fits, dreamed in fragments. Eli's bottle rolling under a hospital bed. Vanessa's face reflected in polished chrome. Nathan laughing at some party I wasn't invited to. Weeks passed in a furious blur. Raina dug through corporate filings and found a shell company Klein used to funnel hush payments. A former IT tech at St. Augustine gave us access to archive server logs. Logs that showed a user account tied to Vanessa's personal email had accessed Eli's file the night of his admission, then attempted to delete entries. A nurse, terrified, signed an affidavit telling what she'd seen. Vanessa in a hospital corridor, talking urgently with someone from records, her hands shaking as if she'd been running. We built the timeline until it fit. like a key turning in a lock. The more we uncovered, the more reckless they became in their attempts to keep things calm on the surface. Vanessa continued her manicured lifestyle, posting carefully curated sorrow-free snapshots. Nathan bought another boat. Their world gleamed. The longer it glittered, the angrier I grew. One evening, as drizzle etched the city lights into smeared stars, there was a knock at my door. My first thought was that it was Nathan or one of his lawyers, come to intimidate. I pressed my ear to the wood and listened. A quiet voice on the other side said, "Clara Palmer? Detective Lopez from the county sheriff's office. May I come in?" Relief and a fresh wave of terror poured through me at the same time. Detective Lopez wasn't the kind of cop who took calls from strangers. He was the kind who came with warrants and weight on his shoulders. Raina had a contact, a former professor who had become a federal clerk. He'd put in a quiet word. Lopez had questions. He wanted to see what I had. I ushered him into my living room, every motion measured so the wall of documents didn't rustle. He sat, folded his hands, and looked at me the way people do when they're trying to figure out what part of your story is true and what part is wishful thinking. "Start from the beginning," he said. I told him everything. The misdiagnosis, the late-night call from Dr. Patel, the footage, Vanessa at the nurse's station, the bribe emails, the shell companies. I pointed to dates and names and handed him copies, keeping the originals in a shoebox under my bed. He read with a face that never betrayed anything. Then he leaned back and said, "This is damning, but we move on paper and on time. We'll need sworn statements, chain of custody for that scrub sample, proof that the payroll transaction was intended to influence hospital records. We can get search warrants, but we have to be surgical. You'll need a warrant for Vanessa's home, Nathan's phone records, Klein's servers, and the hospital records. You'll need to seize bank accounts. You'll need the DA's office to cooperate. They'll fight it." He nodded. "We'll file, but you should know they'll try to smear you. They'll ask why you didn't act sooner, why you let them live your life after Eli died. They'll hire private investigators to dig up anything and everything. They'll try to make you the suspect. It would have been easier to cry then, to break. Instead, something like ice formed in my chest, cold, clear, and unyielding. Make them try," I said. "I'll stand under whatever light they throw." Lopez left with copies of everything and a promise murmured like a prayer. "We'll move fast." We thought that would be the beginning of the end. We were naive. The end prefers to be slow and graceful. It knows how to stretch time into 1,000 small humiliations. The Kleins did what rich people do. They retaliated. An anonymous envelope arrived at my workplace with a picture of my apartment key taped inside. My landlord called, frayed, with rumors of an inspector looking for code violations. Someone pounded on Raina's door at midnight and left pamphlets accusing her outlet of fake news. I found postcards from a private investigator with a single sentence on each. "We know where you work. We know where you sleep." But every threat was a spark. Every attempt to silence us made the story hotter. The investigative outlet ran a background piece on Klein Pharmaceuticals' past ethics complaints. A second whistleblower came forward, an exhausted clinical trial coordinator who'd kept copies of patient consent forms and internal memos that detailed suppressed adverse events. The DA's office quietly convened with federal prosecutor after months of pressure. A judge signed warrants. The raid happened on a gray Tuesday. I watched from a distance as unmarked cars surrounded the Klein legal office. Men and women in plain clothes moved with cold efficiency, carrying boxes that looked small but would contain the kind of truth that changes boardroom smiles into guilty stares. Cameras, real professional ones, were there. Vanessa arrived later in her usual sunglasses and a concierge's smile, but she did not walk to the glass doors. Nathan climbed into a sedan and left without looking back. When the headlines broke, there was a surreal detachment to it all. People I hadn't spoken to since high school messaged me words like brave and sorry. My inbox filled with both praise and poison. But the worst image, the one that kept replaying, was not in the papers. It was a flash of Vanessa's face on a sidewalk, face pallid, lips pressed so thin they seemed to disappear. For a moment, she looked like someone who had been asked to delete a life and realize the magnitude of what she'd ordered. We weren't finished. The legal machine churned with depositions and motions in the slow, grinding teeth of court schedules. Nathan denied knowing anything. Vanessa hired the best. Klein pled not guilty and issued statements about unfortunate coincidences and regulatory misunderstandings. But the evidence was already, finally, out of their control. I still woke up sometimes with my hands clenched, as if I were holding the warm weight of a baby. I still tasted the hospital antiseptic in my sleep. But now, when the memories came, they still saw the edges of my sorrow into something sharper, a tool I could use. One night, weeks after the raids, Raina and I sat on my apartment floor amidst coffee cups and legal pads. The city hummed outside. We looked at each other without needing to speak. "You did it," she said. I thought about Eli and the 2 days I held him and the letter that had wanted me to understand. "We did it," I corrected, "but there's more to do." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "Then we keep going. For Eli, for everyone they thought they could get away with." I pictured Vanessa and Nathan at a gala, the glitter under the chandeliers suddenly colder, their laughter forced. I pictured other mothers in waiting rooms, other parents with empty car seats. I picture a foundation with Eli's name on the door. Some people find purpose immediately, on an altar of grief or in the flash of a courtroom victory. For me, it came in the slow, stubborn work of unraveling a lie until the whole thing fell apart. The burn we planned didn't singe my skin. It cleared the brush so something new could grow. Have you ever had to stay quiet while building your case? Staying calm in public while everything inside you burned? Share your story below. Your voice might be the match someone else needs. The first leak was small, precise, surgical, even. Raina knew how to make the world listen without screaming. She crafted a headline like a scalpel cutting through silence. Asterisk, whistleblower alleges hospital cover-up in infant death case linked to pharmaceutical heiress. Asterisk, no names, no direct accusations. Just a spark. Enough to make people lean forward. Enough to make the internet hold its breath. Within hours, it was everywhere. Thousands of shares, hundreds of retweets. Conspiracy threads blooming like wildfire. News anchors speculated. Reddit sleuths dug through hospital records, and a hashtag began to form. Hashtag hidden in plain sight. The hospital scrambled, releasing a sterile statement about ongoing internal reviews and the utmost commitment to transparency. Klein Pharmaceuticals stock fell by 3% before noon. I watched it unfold from the worn couch in my apartment, the same one I'd slept on when the nightmares got too bad. My laptop screen glowed in the dim light, notifications pouring in faster than I could read them. At first, I felt nothing, just a numb hum in my chest, like static. But then, slowly, something shifted. A faint heat began to spread through me. Not joy, not even relief. It was colder than that, sharper, vindication. Or maybe it was simply the deep, quiet satisfaction of watching the mask start to crack. Nathan's social media went dark within hours. The man who'd once lived for attention, posting every brunch, every business trip, every smug smile beside Vanessa's perfect face, suddenly vanished. His last post had been 2 days before the leak. Him and Vanessa at a gala, glittering under chandeliers, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she clung to his arm. The caption read, asterisk, building a legacy together. Asterisk, they had no idea what was coming. A week later, Raina dropped a second article. No mercy this time. It outlined the entire drug trial timeline, how infants had been dosed without proper disclosure, how the trial data was edited, how Vanessa's badge logs placed her in the neonatal wing at impossible hours. It detailed payments funneled through shell companies to hospital board members. It didn't name Nathan or Vanessa, not directly, but the puzzle pieces were there, and the internet knew how to solve puzzles. The story detonated. Cable news ran it on a loop. Morning shows brought in medical ethics experts to discuss pharmaceutical negligence. Grieving parents began to speak out. Families whose babies had suffered complications, whose warnings were dismissed. Their faces filled my feed, trembling voices describing the same words I'd once heard. Rare, unpreventable, genetic. Klein Pharmaceuticals bled value overnight. 18% gone. Gerald Klein, polished and practiced. appeared on national television calling it a smear campaign. A coordinated attack by competitors, he said. Pure fiction. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Vanessa stayed silent. Clever. Her lawyers probably told her that silence couldn't be subpoenaed. But Nathan cracked. He couldn't stand being ignored. He needed the spotlight, even if it burned him. He posted a long, rambling Facebook rant about vindictive ex-wives and manufactured lies. He wrote about how some people weaponize grief to destroy success. He didn't use my name, but he didn't have to. Everyone knew. His mother shared the post with hearts and prayer emojis, calling him her strong boy standing firm against hate. His friends commented their sympathy, their outrage. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I just saved every word, every timestamp, every thread. Added it neatly to the evidence folder titled Truth, piece by piece. 2 weeks later, Raina and I agreed it was time for the final strike. The truth, unfiltered. We released the footage. Pixelated faces for legal safety, but the image was unmistakable. Vanessa, the neonatal ward, the syringe, her gloved hand checking the hallway before she slipped inside. The timestamp matched Eli's final hours. The world exploded. Within 6 hours, every major network was running the story. Talk shows debated it. Comment sections erupted with fury. Hashtag Justice for Eli trended across every platform. People demanded resignations, arrests, reform. Protesters stood outside Klein Pharmaceuticals, holding candles and photos of babies lost to rare genetic conditions. The stock tanked 40% in a day. Gerald Klein stumbled through a press conference, his voice trembling as he blamed digital manipulation and AI deepfakes. But the hospital confirmed the footage's authenticity. The police announced a reopened investigation, no longer a tragic anomaly, but a criminal act. Then came the call, a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for another night shift I didn't technically need anymore. Raina's outlet had hired me as a research consultant, but I still couldn't give up the rhythm of work. It kept me grounded. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Rowan? This is Detective Maria Santos. Her tone was calm, professional, but there was weight behind it. I wanted to inform you that we've arrested Vanessa Rowan, formerly Vanessa Klein, for tamper with medical equipment resulting in homicide. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. My knees wouldn't hold me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. And Nathan, we're building a case against him as well, she said. The financial records you provided show significant deposits from the Klein family to accounts in his name, starting 2 weeks before your son's death. We believe he knew what was happening. I thanked her, hung up, then just sat there. The room felt too quiet, too still. The morning light slanted to the blinds, dust floating like ghosts in air. I dreamed of this moment. Justice. The truth laid bare. But now that it was here, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel healed. I felt empty, hollowed out, because no verdict, no arrest, no ruined empire could ever bring back what I'd lost. Eli's name was trending worldwide, but he was still gone. Justice, it turns out, doesn't bring peace. It only brings silence, the kind that forces you to sit with everything you survived. If you finally got the justice you'd begged the universe for, would it heal you? Or would it just remind you how much you lost along the way? Tell me in the comments. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Industrial white walls, fluorescent lights, wooden benches that made your back ache after 20 minutes. I sat in the gallery wearing the only dress I owned, black, simple, bought from a clearance rack specifically for this moment. Vanessa sat at the defense table in designer clothes that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. But her hands were cuffed, and that made all the difference. Nathan sat 3 rows behind her, his face pale, his expensive suit looking suddenly cheap under the harsh lights. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I attended every single day, heard every piece of evidence presented, watched as Vanessa's lawyers tried to paint her as a concerned visitor who'd simply been checking on babies at night, listened as they argued there was no definitive proof the syringe contained anything harmful. Then the prosecution brought out their evidence. The chemical analysis of residue found in Eli's foreline, The toxicology report showing compounds that matched Klein Pharmaceuticals' experimental drug. The financial records showing payments from the Klein family to Nathan's account. The emails between Vanessa and hospital board members. One of those emails was particularly damning. Vanessa had written, "The Rowan infant file needs to disappear, whatever it takes. My father's company can't survive another scandal, whatever it takes." She'd written those words 3 days before my baby died. The courtroom was silent when that email appeared on the screen. I watched Vanessa's face drain of color, watched her lean over to whisper frantically to her lawyer, watched Nathan close his eyes like he could make it all disappear if he just didn't look. When the footage played the full unedited security video, I couldn't watch Vanessa. I watched the jury instead. Saw their faces shift from neutral observation to horror. Saw one woman cover her mouth. Saw a man shake his head slowly, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Vanessa's lawyer tried to claim she'd been suffering from postpartum depression, even though she'd never been pregnant. Tried to argue temporary insanity brought on by the stress of her father's company. Tried everything to make her seem like a victim of circumstances rather than a cold-blooded killer. It didn't work. The prosecution played a recording of a phone call between Vanessa and her father made 2 days after Eli's death. In it, Gerald Klein said, "You did what needed to be done. The family is protected." And Vanessa replied, "I know, Daddy. It's handled." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict with steady voice. Guilty of first-degree murder. Vanessa's face crumbled. She turned to look at Nathan, her eyes full of rage and blame, like this was somehow his fault for not protecting her. He just stared at the floor. Then came Nathan's trial. He was charged as an accessory to murder and conspiracy. His defense was that he'd been manipulated by Vanessa, that he hadn't known what she planned, that he'd only accepted money from her family for business consulting. But the emails told a different story. Emails where he told Vanessa, "Clara's genetics claim gives us perfect cover." Emails where he'd calculated how much money he'd receive after divorcing me and marrying her. Emails where he'd written, "Once the baby situation is handled, we can move forward with our plans." The baby situation. That's what he called our son's murder. The jury found him guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Nathan finally looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time since Eli died. I saw fear in his eyes. Fear and something that might have been regret, though I doubted he was capable of actual remorse. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see my face. To see that I'd survived everything he'd done to destroy me. To know that while he'd be spending the next 20 years in prison, I'd be out here rebuilding my life from the pieces he'd tried to scatter. Would you have been able to look your ex in the eyes after everything? Or would it have been too painful? Comment your honest answer. Vanessa was sentenced to life without parole. Nathan got 25 years. Gerald Klein and 2 hospital board members were also charged of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. When I walked out of that courthouse, the sun was setting. The sky was orange and pink and purple, the kind of sunset that makes you remember beauty still exists. I stood on those courthouse steps and breathed in air that felt different somehow, lighter. 5 years after Eli's death, I stood in front of a room full of mothers who'd lost children, some to medical mistakes, some to corporate negligence, some to people who thought they could kill without consequences. They looked at me with the same hollow eyes I'd once seen in my own mirror, eyes that had seen too much, hurt too deeply, wonder if life was worth continuing. "I'm not going to tell you the pain goes away," I said. "It doesn't. There are still mornings I wake up and forget for just a second that my son is gone. Still moments when I see a boy who would be his age and have to stop myself from imagining what Eli would look like now." I paused, looking at each face. "But I'm going to tell you something else. You are not defined by what was taken from you. You're defined by what you choose to build from the pieces." After the talk, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, her eyes red from crying. "My daughter died 3 months ago. The hospital said it was SIDS, but I know something was wrong. They won't listen to me. Everyone thinks I'm just a grieving mother who can't accept reality." I took her hands in mine. "Tell me everything." and then we're going to make them listen. That's what the foundation did. We made people listen. We forced hospitals to review cases they'd marked as closed. We pushed pharmaceutical companies to admit mistakes they'd try to hide. We gave voices to mothers who'd been silenced by grief and dismissed as hysterical. Nathan's mother tried to contact me once, 2 years after his sentencing, left a voicemail asking if I'd be willing to tell the parole board that Nathan had been manipulated, that he deserved a second chance. I deleted it without responding. Some people don't deserve second chances. Some actions can't be forgiven, even by time. I never remarried, never had other children. Some people told me I should try again, that I'd make a wonderful mother. But Eli was my child, the only one I was meant to have. And in a strange way, through the foundation, I was mothering hundreds of families, protecting them, fighting for them, making sure their children's deaths meant something. I also never forgot what had been done to me, the accusation that my genes were defective, the way Nathan had blamed me for something that wasn't my fault. That wasn't even real. It taught me something important. People will try to make you carry their guilt. They'll project their sins onto you because it's easier than facing what they've done. But you don't have to carry it. You can set it down and walk away. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone different than the broken woman who lived above that laundromat. I see scars, yes. Lines around my eyes from tears and sleepless nights. Gray hair I don't bother to dye. But I also see strength, purpose. A woman who was destroyed and chose to rebuild herself into something unbreakable. The foundation just announced we're opening a second office in Chicago. We're hiring more lawyers, more counselors, more investigators. We're expanding our reach because there are too many families out there suffering in silence, being told their children's deaths were unavoidable, being blamed for things beyond their control. Every family we help is a small victory against people who think money and power put them above consequences. Every lawsuit we win is another crack in the wall that protects corporate criminals. Every mother who finds justice is proof that speaking up matters, that fighting back works, that the truth eventually surfaces no matter how deep they try to bury it. Last week, I received a letter from a mother in Oregon whose son died under suspicious circumstances at a hospital funded by a pharmaceutical company. She'd seen my story online and wanted to know if the foundation could help. I called her personally, heard her story, and by the end of the week, we had lawyers reviewing her case. This is what I do now. This is who I am. Not the woman whose baby was murdered. Not the wife who was blamed and abandoned. I'm the woman who survived all of that and decided to make sure other mothers don't have to fight alone. They thought they could bury the truth with my son. They thought grief would silence me. They thought I'd disappear into poverty and pain and stay there forever. They were wrong, because you can destroy a woman's heart, but you can't kill her truth. And sometimes the strongest people are the ones who were broken first and chose to rebuild themselves into warriors. If this story moved you, if it made you think about justice and strength and refusing to stay silent, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this one that need to be heard. Stories of people who were told they didn't matter, but proved everyone wrong. Hit that like button if you believe truth always wins in the end. And drop a comment sharing your thoughts. Your words might inspire someone else who's going through their darkest moment right now. And remember, they thought they buried me with my child, but all they did was plant the seed of my strength. Thank you for listening to Eli's story. Thank you for helping keep his legacy alive.